My husband's parents said I trapped him with pregnancy, until the fertility clinic director testified. The courtroom felt like a gladiator arena where my character was being torn apart for public entertainment. Gerald and Patricia Torres sat at the plaintiff's table like royalty presiding over my execution. Their lawyer a shark in Armani who'd already smelled blood in the water. The custody hearing for my 6-month-old daughter had turned into a character assassination, with me as the target. Gold Digger got pregnant on purpose. Patricia spat from the witness stand, her pearl necklace catching the harsh courtroom lights as she leaned forward with theatrical disgust. Probably poked holes in the protection. That's what these types do, trap successful men with babies they never wanted. The gallery murmured agreement, packed as it was with Gerald's golf buddies and Patricia's book club, all eager to watch the downfall of the woman who'd dared to marry above her station. My husband Daniel sat beside his parents, his face a mask of exhaustion and something else. Shame, maybe, though he'd never admit it. Can you elaborate on why you believe the pregnancy was intentional manipulation? Their lawyer, Harrison Fitzgerald, prompted with the smooth confidence of someone who'd already won. Patricia straightened, relishing her moment. She was a nobody when Daniel met her. Working some menial job at a medical clinic, probably as a receptionist or janitor. Then suddenly, just when Daniel gets his promotion to partner at the firm, she's pregnant? Please. The timing says everything. I kept my hands folded in my lap, feeling my lawyer, Grace Chen, tense beside me. We'd agreed to let them present their entire case first, to let them commit fully to their narrative. But sitting through this public humiliation while my baby was with a court-appointed guardian was agony. And the defendant's behavior during pregnancy. Fitzgerald continued. Obsessive, Patricia declared. Constantly at medical appointments, taking strange medications, insisting on special procedures. She even made Daniel go to some clinic for tests before she got pregnant, probably making sure her trap would work. Gerald nodded approvingly from his seat. She targeted our son from day one. He was vulnerable after his cancer treatment, and she swooped in like a vulture. Cancer treatment. They mentioned it like a footnote, like it wasn't the center of everything that had happened. Judge Marianne Foster made notes, her expression neutral but attentive. Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have additional witnesses? Several, Your Honor. We'd like to call Margaret Henley. Margaret, Daniel's ex-girlfriend, took the stand with practiced grace. Of course they'd brought her, the suitable match, the one who got away, the woman Daniel should have married according to his parents. I dated Daniel for 3 years, Margaret said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. He always said he wasn't ready for children. Then suddenly, with her, is a father within a year of marriage? She obviously pressured him when he was weak from his illness. Objection, Grace said calmly. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Foster said. Please stick to facts you witnessed, Ms. Henley. Margaret adjusted her testimony slightly. When I visited Daniel during his treatment, he specifically told me he might never be able to have children because of the chemotherapy. He said he'd frozen sperm as a precaution but wasn't sure he'd ever use it. Then she shows up, and suddenly there's a baby? It's suspicious. The gallery murmured again, the sound like wasps building a nest of judgment. The defendant was clearly after the Torres family money. Patricia interjected from her seat, unable to contain herself. A baby guarantees 18 years of support, even if Daniel divorced her. Mrs. Torres, please remain quiet unless you're on the stand, Judge Foster warned. Grace stood. Your Honor, if we're discussing the pregnancy circumstances, I'd like to call my witness now rather than wait for our defense. Proceed, the judge said. The defense calls Dr. Robert Krishnamurti, director of the Reproductive Health Institute of Boston. A tall man in his 60s entered, his presence immediately commanding respect. Several people in the gallery sat up straighter, recognizing the name from news articles about breakthrough fertility treatments. Dr. Krishnamurti, Grace began after he was sworn in. What is your relationship to the defendant, Isabella Torres? He looked at me with something I hadn't seen from anyone in that courtroom except Grace, professional respect. Mrs. Torres, Dr. Torres, technically, was our lead embryologist for 7 years. She's one of the most talented reproductive specialists I've ever worked with. The silence that followed was absolute. I'm sorry, Fitzgerald said, standing. Did you say Dr. Torres? Yes, Dr. Krishnamurti replied patiently. Dr. Isabella Torres holds a PhD in reproductive biology from Johns Hopkins and an MD from Harvard Medical School. She completed her residency in reproductive endocrinology at Mass General. Patricia's face had gone pale. That's impossible. She was a clinic worker. She was running our IVF laboratory, Dr. Krishnamurti corrected firmly. She developed 3 of our most successful protocols for fertility preservation in cancer patients. In fact, she literally wrote the handbook we use for oncofertility cases. Grace handed him a document. Can you explain what happened regarding Dr. Torres's pregnancy? Dr. Krishnamurti's expression softened. It's all here in the medical records. When Daniel Torres was diagnosed with testicular cancer, his oncologist referred him to our clinic for fertility preservation before beginning chemotherapy. Dr. Torres, Isabella, was assigned to his case because she specialized in cancer-related fertility issues. But she wasn't supposed to treat family, Fitzgerald started. They weren't married then, Dr. Krishnamurti interrupted. They weren't even dating. She was his medical provider, maintaining strict professional boundaries despite what must have been a personal interest. She supervised the preservation of his genetic material and counseled him through the process. And then, Grace prompted. They didn't begin a personal relationship until a full year after his treatment ended and he was declared in remission. She actually transferred his case to another embryologist before they started dating to avoid any ethical conflicts. Daniel had shifted in his seat, his head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dr. Krishnamurti continued. When they decided to try for a child after marriage, they came to me. The chemotherapy had left Daniel completely sterile, a common side effect we'd warned him about. Natural conception was impossible. Impossible, Judge Foster repeated, looking at Patricia. So the accusation about tampering with protection is medically absurd, Dr. Krishnamurti said flatly. There was no protection to tamper with. Mr. Torres couldn't father a child naturally. The only way Dr. Torres could have become pregnant was through IVF using the sperm frozen before his treatment. Patricia stood up, shaking. But she got pregnant so easily. It must have been manipulation. Dr. Krishnamurti actually laughed, though not unkindly. Easily? Dr. Torres performed IVF on herself. Do you understand what that means? She administered her own hormone injections for weeks, monitored her own cycle, and went through egg retrieval, an invasive surgical procedure. Then she had to create the embryos using her husband's frozen sperm, test them for viability, and perform the transfer. He pulled out another file. She went through 3 failed cycles before this pregnancy succeeded. 3 cycles of physical and emotional torture that most couples barely survive together. She did it while working full-time and supporting her husband through his recovery. Why didn't she have another doctor do it? Judge Foster asked. She did, for the actual procedures, Dr. Krishnamurti explained. But she managed her own treatment protocol because, frankly, she's better at it than anyone else in our clinic. Her success rates are 15% higher than the national average. If anyone could get pregnant under those circumstances, it would be her. Grace pulled out more documents. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Dr. Torres's employment records, including her salary history. Judge Foster reviewed them, her eyebrows rising. Dr. Torres, your annual salary is $340,000. I nodded quietly. She makes more than Daniel, Grace said simply. Has since before they met. The gold digger accusation is not just false, it's laughable. Gerald stood up abruptly. This is all lies. Daniel, tell them. Everyone turned to Daniel, who finally looked up. His face was drawn, hollow. It's true, he said quietly. All of it. Daniel. Patricia gasped. He continued, his voice getting stronger. Isabella saved my ability to have children when I thought cancer had taken everything. She was professional, kind, and brilliant. I pursued her, not the other way around. She made me wait a year after treatment because she wanted to be sure it was real, not just patient transference. But you said, Gerald started. I know what I said. Daniel snapped, finally showing emotion. I was embarrassed. My wife was smarter than me, more successful than me, and she'd seen me at my absolute worst. When you kept pushing the narrative that she was after our money, it was easier to stay quiet than admit she was the one supporting us while I recovered. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in months. The fertility treatments nearly broke her. She'd come home from performing procedures on other couples, then inject herself with hormones that made her sick. She did it all because I wanted to be a father, because I was terrified the cancer had stolen that from me. Why didn't you defend her? Judge Foster asked pointedly. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Because I'm a coward. Because when she went back to work after the baby was born and I had to be the primary caregiver, My parents convinced me she was choosing career over family. They made me believe she didn't really want our daughter, that the pregnancy had just been a career move somehow. A career move? Dr. Krishnamurti interjected. She gave up a promotion to Chief of Reproductive Services because it would have meant more travel away from her family. She's been working part-time since the birth, losing nearly $200,000 a year to spend more time with her daughter. Patricia had sunk into her chair, but she tried one more attack. But she's so cold, so clinical with the baby. She has postpartum anxiety, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice came out steady despite years of keeping silent. I'm terrified every moment that something will happen to her. After everything we went through to have her, after watching dozens of couples lose their babies in my clinic, I'm scared. It makes me seem distant, but it's actually because I love her so much it physically hurts. You never said, Daniel started. You never asked, I replied. You were too busy listening to your parents tell you what kind of mother I should be. Judge Foster looked at the entire courtroom with barely concealed disgust. Let me summarize what I've heard. Dr. Torres, a leading fertility specialist, used her expertise to preserve her husband's fertility before cancer treatment. She then went through months of painful procedures to conceive using IVF because natural conception was impossible. She did this while being the primary breadwinner and supporting her husband's recovery. She turned to Gerald and Patricia. And you accused her of being a gold digger who trapped your son with a pregnancy that was medically impossible to achieve the way you described. We didn't know, Patricia started. You didn't ask. Judge Foster cut her off. You assumed. You saw a woman you considered beneath your social class and created a narrative that fit your prejudices. She shuffled her papers. I'm granting full custody to Dr. Torres. Mr. Torres will have supervised visitation until he completes counseling to address his inability to defend his wife against false accusations. Mr. and Mrs. Torres Sr. are barred from unsupervised contact with the child until they complete counseling to address their classist attitudes and false allegations. Your Honor, Fitzgerald tried. I'm not finished, Judge Foster said sharply. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney for potential defamation charges. Publicly accusing someone of reproductive coercion when medical records clearly show it was impossible constitutes slander. She looked at me. Dr. Torres, I apologize that you had to endure this. Your professional achievements and personal sacrifices deserved respect, not this circus. As people filed out, Patricia approached me, tears running down her face. Isabella, Dr. Torres, I corrected quietly. After 3 years of marriage, you never once bothered to learn what I actually did for a living. You heard clinic and assumed the worst because it fit the story you wanted to tell, that your precious son had married down. How were we supposed to know? Gerald blustered. You could have asked. You could have Googled me. You could have attended even one of Daniel's cancer follow-up appointments where every nurse and doctor greets me by name and asks about my research. You could have wondered how we afforded our house on just Daniel's salary during his recovery. I picked up my bag. The same designer bag Patricia had once mocked as obviously fake, not knowing it was a gift from a grateful patient who'd finally had twins after 10 years of trying. Your son had cancer, I said quietly. I saved his future children before his treatment destroyed that possibility. I held him through chemotherapy, cleaned up after him, and watched him nearly die. Then I put myself through hell to give him the child he desperately wanted. And you called me a gold digger. Daniel stood. Bella, please. I'll have Grace contact you about visitation, I said, not looking at him. Maybe seeing Lily will remind you that she exists because I refused to let cancer take fatherhood from you. Not because I trapped you, but because I loved you enough to endure anything to give you what you wanted most. As I walked out, I heard Dr. Krishnamurti saying to someone, she's the reason hundreds of cancer patients have children today. Her protocols have become the international standard. And they thought she was the janitor. Outside, Grace caught up with me. You okay? I will be, I said, thinking of my daughter, who would grow up knowing her mother was neither a gold digger nor a trap setter, but a doctor who'd used her expertise to create life against impossible odds. The Torres family had believed their own fiction so completely they'd never bothered to investigate the truth. That their son hadn't married down. He'd married so far up he'd needed a medical degree just to understand what his wife did for a living. And now everyone knew it.